Tribunal 2 is now in session. God save the United States of America and this honorable tribunal. That would be ordered in the courtroom.
Marshal will ascertain whether the defendant, Gerhard Milch, is present in court.
May it please your honors, the defendant is present in the courtroom.
Counsel, Dr. Bergold, is also present.
Dr. Bergold is also present in the courtroom.
Prosecuting counsel may proceed with the indictment by reading proceed with the arraignment by reading the indictment.
Your honors, please. Military Tribunals, case number 2. United States of America against Gerhard Milch, defendant. The indictment. United States of America, by the undersigned Telford Taylor, Chief of Counsel for War Crimes, duly appointed to represent said government in the prosecution of war criminals, charges the defendant Gerhard Milch with the commission of war crimes and crimes against humanity. On 20 December 1945. In 1945, the defendant Milch unlawfully, willfully, and knowingly committed war crimes defined by Article 2 of Control Council Law Number 10, in that he was a principal in, accessory to, ordered, abetted, took a consenting part in, and was connected with plans and enterprises involving the use of prisoners of war in war operations and work having a direct relation with war operations, including the manufacture and transportation of enterprises charged in paragraphs 1 and 2 of this count. Millions of persons were unlawfully subjected to forced labor under cruel and inhumane conditions, which resulted in widespread suffering. The conscription of labor, at least 5 million workers were deported to Germany. The conscription of labor was accomplished in many cases by drastic and violent methods. From about March 1942 to about August 1942, experiments were conducted at the Dachau concentration camps for the benefit of the German Air Force to investigate the limits of human endurance and existence at extremely high altitudes. The experiments were carried out in a low-pressure chamber in which the atmospheric conditions and pressure 1942 to about May 1943. Experiments were conducted at the Dachau concentration camp primarily for the benefit of the German Air Force to investigate the most effective means of treating persons who had been severely chilled or frozen. In one series of experiments, the subjects were forced to remain in a tank of ice water for periods up to 3 hours. Extreme rigor developed in a short time. Numerous victims died in the course of these experiments. After the survivors were severely chilled, rewarming was attempted by various means. In another series of experiments, the subjects were 4, 5, 6, 7, and 46 of the Hague Convention, as you were regulations 1907, and of Articles 2, 3, and 4 of the Prisoner of War Convention 29. The laws and customs of war, the general principles of criminal laws derived from the criminal laws of all civilized nations, and the internal penal laws of the countries in which such crimes were committed, and Article 2 of Control Council Law, deportation to slave labor of German nationals and nationals of other countries, in the course of which millions of persons were enslaved, deported, ill-treated, terrorized, tortured, and murdered. Particulars of these crimes are set forth in Count 1 of this indictment and are incorporated herein by reference. Between March 1942 and May 1943, the defendant Milch unlawfully, willfully, and knowingly committed crimes against humanity as defined in Article 2 of Control Council Law Number 10, in that he was a principal in, accessory to, ordered, abetted, took a consenting part in, and was connected with plans and enterprises involving medical experiments without the subject's consent upon German nationals and nationals of other countries, in the course of which experiments the defendant Milch, together with divers other persons, committed murders, brutalities, cruelties, tortures, atrocities.
Has been translated into the German language, which you understand. For more than 30 days, you have had in your possession a copy of this indictment, translated into the German language. The Secretary General will enter upon the records of the court the defendant's plea of not guilty. You may be seated. Any other matter? Very well. The order having been entered for the commencement of the trial, this tribunal will be in recess until that time. Defendant will stand. The barbarous acts which have been revealed here originated in the lust and ambition of comparatively few men. But all Germans are paying and will pay for the degradation of their souls and the debasement of the German honor caused by following the false prophets who led them to disaster. It would be a travesty on justice to permit those false leaders, including this defendant, to escape responsibility for the deception and betrayal of their people. It would be even a greater injustice to view with complacence the mass graves of millions of men, women, and children whose only crime was that they stood in Hitler's way. Retribution for such crimes against humanity must be swift and certain. Future would-be dictators and their subservient satellites must know what follows their defilement of international law and of every type of decency and fair dealing with their fellow men. Civilization will be satisfied with nothing less. It is the sentence of this tribunal that the defendant, Erhard Milch, be confined to the Rebdorf prison for the remainder of his natural life. The marshal will remove the defendant from the courtroom. The Secretary General will record the sentence of the tribunal, which I hand him.
Vor dem amerikanischen Militärgerichtshof in Nürnberg wurde der Prozess gegen den ehemaligen Generalfeldmarschall und Generalinspekteur der Luftwaffe Erhard Milch abgeschlossen. Das Gericht erkannte den Angeklagten für schuldig, maßgeblich an der Verschleppung und Zwangsarbeit der Zivilbevölkerung vieler Länder beteiligt gewesen zu sein. Auch die Verwendung von Kriegsgefangenen im Dienste der Verteidigung Deutschlands geschah mit Wissen und Billigung von Milch. Bei seiner Verteidigung hatte Milch sich bemüht, den Nachweis zu erbringen, dass er versucht habe, sich von Hitler und seinem Kreis zu distanzieren. Die Anklagevertretung konnte jedoch beweisen, dass Milch nichts unternommen hatte, die ihm bekannten Zustände abzustellen. Das Urteil lautete auf lebenslängliches Gefängnis.
It is the sentence of this tribunal that the defendant, Erhard Milch, be confined to the Rebdorf prison for the remainder of his natural life.
Als mitschuldig an Kriegsverbrechen und Verbrechen gegen die Menschlichkeit hat Erhard Milch die fundamentalen Grundsätze der Genfer und Haager Konvention missachtet.